What is tithe? It goes in this little envelope, but where does it go from there? And what does it do? This is how tithe works. While offerings stay within a local church if they are designated for local church budget, whatever is marked as tithe is wholly passed to the local conference. So let's imagine a person puts $100 into a tithe envelope and designates it as tithe. Where does that money go? Of every $100, about $77.20 stays in the local conference. About $9 goes to the union. About $13 goes to the North American Division, NAD, and the General Conference, and a little less than $1 goes towards special assistance, which helps support conferences who are less financially able. But this is only part of the story, because the unions, divisions, and the General Conference return a significant portion of their original share directly and indirectly back to the conferences in the form of appropriations, subsidies, resources, and services. So when we talk about the $9 that goes to the union and the $13 that goes to the NAD and GC, it doesn't all stay there. Much of it is reallocated across the church based on needs and provides invaluable services that would otherwise be unaffordable by individual conferences. Here's where the money that doesn't stay at the local conferences goes. The NAD and GC retain about 10% combined. The union retains about 7%. About 4% is appropriated back to the local system from the GC and NAD. About 2% is appropriated back into the ecosystem for the union. And almost 1% is appropriated for those conferences eligible for special assistance. With this in mind, the conference actually retains or is appropriated 83% of all tithe, while the union, divisions, and the GC retain approximately 17%. In sum, this means out of a $100 bill, the unions, the divisions, and the GC retain only about $17 or 17% of gross tithe. But there's even more complexity. Every conference has great needs, and there aren't always enough resources to go around. But this is the miraculous thing about the Adventist tithe system. Large conferences have more resources, so they tend to carry a greater responsibility to support the church at large and provide assistance to other conferences that are less financially able. Medium and larger conferences, because they have more resources, retain or receive back on average between 80 and 85% of all of their tithe. Smaller and less financially able conferences typically retain or receive back between 90 and 95% of their tithe. In a couple of more extreme cases, there are conferences who actually receive more funding back than they sent out, or more than 100%. So how is the 17% of tithe retained by the unions, the NAD, and the General Conference spent? Explaining it would take a while, but here are just a few of the ways it's spent. Publishing, missionary processing and deployment, legal services, religious liberty services, planned giving and trust services, risk management and insurance, investments, Advent Source, ADRA, Adventist Community Services, Christian Record Services, chaplaincy ministries, resource development for things like Sabbath School, youth ministries, stewardship, education accreditation, and the Adventist Learning Community, accounting and auditing, Adventist giving, e-Adventist, data hosting, Adventist Church Connect, Adventist School Connect, Adventist Education Curriculum Development, seminary support, university support, and media ministries. Again, this is only part of how unions, the NAD, and the GC allocate the 17%, but all of these services benefit the conference and the local church. If the unions, divisions, and the General Conference didn't exist, each conference would have to face the impossible task of paying for these services individually. In most cases, conferences would have to pick and choose what they could afford, and in many cases, conferences could not sustain the needed services and would face closure. It's true, the church's financial structure and ecosystem is complicated, but God set it up in such a way that together we are stronger. Through economies of scale and pooling its resources, the church, through God's abundance, provides a host of services to members and the worldwide community that would otherwise be impossible.